Hey there, everyone, and welcome to another video installment. I'm Kelly from Kelly's Astrology, and today I'm going to be answering a couple of questions about solar returns. So, solar returns are a timing technique that astrologers use to help forecast the year ahead. And there's a couple of questions that come up a lot from people who are interested in solar returns or working with solar returns that want to know a little bit more about how to navigate them. So, first up, before I get into answering the questions, let me tell you a little bit about what a solar return is. So, a solar return, think about the words solar and return. They're talking about the sun, which is the word for solar, and the return of the sun. This is basically a chart for your birthday because your birthday is celebrated each year on the same calendar date, which is approximately when the sun is back in the same degree and same sign of the zodiac that it was when you were born. Now, specifically, your solar return chart is a chart formed for the exact moment when the transiting sun in the sky in the current year is back at the exact same degree and minute that it was in your birth chart. So your solar return chart is like a birthday chart. And it happens once a year, and we anchor that chart based on the transiting sun coming back to the exact degree and minute that your natal sun is at. And so that solar return chart can give us some information about not just your birthday that year, but it is said to highlight themes for the year ahead. And different astrologers at different periods in time have used the solar return chart in different ways. So there are lots of different techniques and different ways of working with the solar return chart. I'm going to share with you just a little bit about how I work with it as I answer these questions. So you'll hear a little bit about how I go into that. But what I also want to let you know, as I'm going to answer these questions on solar returns, is that I do have a two-part training on solar returns in the birth chart. And so what I want to do is share with you just a little bit about that training. Here it is. So I have a two-part webinar called Profections and Solar Returns for Better Annual Forecasting. I taught this a few years ago, and it came out of a demand from my student group at the time of wanting to know how I, as a traditionally oriented astrologer, work with solar returns. And there's a real interface with the technique of annual profections. So in this two-part webinar, you kind of get two for one. I'm going to teach you about annual profections, and I'm going to show you how they interact with solar returns. So there's some really juicy information in here about timing with solar returns, about how to use the solar returns in conjunction with the annual profections. So that's on my website, kellysastrology.com/product/profections. And I'll pop the link for this in the comment section below. If you've got any questions about solar returns or you're looking for more info, let me know in the comments below. Many of these questions I might have answered in the training. So that's going to be a great place to go for the full treatment of this technique. But some of you might have quick questions, although this video might answer them for you. So one of the questions I had was, for solar returns, do you place them on top of a person's natal chart, or do you read the solar return by itself? And this question comes out of the fact that the solar return does create an individual or extra chart. And the question this student is asking is, do I read the solar return as a standalone independent chart, or am I supposed to do something with that solar return in relation to the natal chart? And the way I work with them is that I do place the solar return around the outside of the birth chart. So I would create in Solarfire, which is the software I use, I create what's called a bi-wheel display. And the birth chart or the natal chart, which is the root, is always in the center. And any timing charts that I use will be in the outside wheel. So when I'm looking at a solar return chart, I'm going to pop that in the outside wheel around the natal chart. And I'm going to show you what this looks like in a minute. So stay tuned if you want a visual. It's more common, I think, in modern styles of astrology to read the solar return as a separate independent chart. And so if that's a technique you're interested in, I would encourage you to seek out a more modern trained astrologer or astrologer who works with those types of modern techniques. So what I do is I place that solar return chart around the natal chart, and I'm doing some very specific things that are tied into the profections or the time lords there. And I'll show you in an example very soon. The other question that I had on solar return charts was about relocation and solar return charts. So this question is, do you use relocated charts for the solar returns? And the answer for that from me, just from the way I work, is no. So I know that there is a particular approach in some styles of astrology where there's an encouragement for people to go to different parts of the world or different places in the world so that they can get a different or perhaps better solar return or birthday chart for the year ahead. I guess I'm of the opinion that wherever you go, there you are, and that our birth chart, which is really anchored to the place that we first took breath and became in this world, incarnate as a human, that birth chart and that birth location is really integral to the astrology and to the symbolism that we're drawing on from the astrology. And I do say this to you as someone who only lived in their birth location for about 2 years. And since then, I've not lived in the city that I was born in. I have lived a little bit further away from that and very, very, very far away from the place I was born. I've spent most of my life living in other places from the location that I was born, but I've always used my birth location for my solar return charts. And not everyone will do that, and that's okay. I'm not saying that my way is the best way or the right way. It's just how it fits with me philosophically with the kind of astrology that I practice. So I would set my solar return chart for my birth location every year, and then I would display that around my natal chart and go into the interpretation from that perspective. So let's look at a little example so we can see this in action. So we're going to use the chart of singer Adele, and I'm going to bring you straight into that bi-wheel display that I was talking about. So here is that on the screen. So in the inside wheel is Adele's natal chart or birth chart, and that's created using her birth data, of course. You can see the outside wheel is created using the solar return information for her most recent solar return. So I'm recording this in early 2022, but the most recent previous birthday of Adele was her birthday in May of 2021. It is February of 2022 as I'm recording this, and so she hasn't had her birthday yet this year. So even though the calendar year has ticked over to 2022, the solar return and the birthday influences from May of 2021 still hold energetic sway and influence for Adele and for any of you who haven't yet had your birthday so far in this calendar year. And since it's only February, it's most of you, even me. My birthday is in the early part of the year, but we haven't got to it yet. And so I'm still running the solar return or birthday chart themes from my previous birthday in 2021. Okay, so that's a little bit about the technicalities. Remember, I was saying the solar return chart is created for the moment when the sun, so that's the transiting sun, the sun in the outer wheel or the bi-wheel chart, is at the exact same degree and minute as it is in the birth chart. So in Adele's natal chart, the sun is at 15 degrees, 00 minutes in Taurus. So every year when the sun comes back to 15 degrees, 00 minutes, Adele has her solar return. Now, it is important to note that your solar return might happen on a calendar date that is the day before, the day of, or the day after your birthday. Your birth date. That's okay. The solar return is timed to the movement of the sun. It will be very near to your calendar birthday date, but it might not be the exact one. So that's important to note. You can also see that I have used Adele's birth location of Tottenham, England, as the location for her solar return chart. Even though Adele now lives in Los Angeles, I believe her place of birth still holds sway, at least to my way of thinking. So to the question about do I use relocation charts for solar returns, I don't, but I know that there are other astrologers that do. And again, if you're interested in that, I recommend you seek them out. And so to the question that we had first about for solar returns, do you place them on top of a person's natal chart or read the solar return alone? This is the bi-wheel version that I prefer, which is where we have the solar return placed around the outside or kind of the on top of the natal chart. Now, what I would be, there's a few things you can do. You can do some basic sort of aspect work, looking and seeing, how does the natal chart interact with the solar return chart? And you might see things along the lines of, oh, that's interesting. The solar return Mars and ascendant is very close to the natal ascendant for Adele this year. We might see that the solar return moon is very close to the natal midheaven this year. And you can make some interpretive statements just by combining the keywords and qualities of the planets and angles that might be there. You can see that this solar return also coincides very closely with a Mercury return, because Mercury in the solar return chart is very close to the natal degree of Mercury. And you will notice some patterns there, particularly with Mercury and Venus, that there are some solar return years where we will also see Mercury or Venus in the same sign as our natal Mercury and Venus. And you can extrapolate symbolically from there. Because I have this ancient astrological infusion into the style or the way that I practice, I'm going to draw on the annual profection methodology. And so for that, we need to work out Adele's age. So we need to work out, if she was born in 1988, how old was she in 2021? Now, I usually do these things on the fly and in my head, but I don't want to make a mistake while we're here on the video together. And so I'm going to, some of you have probably worked it out already. I can usually do calculations very quickly in my head, but not when I'm also on camera. So Adele was 33 in 2021. And so the 33rd birthday coincides with the 10th house by annual profection. And all of this theory that I'm just drawing on here is what I teach in that 2-part webinar that I showed you earlier in the video, and I'll link to underneath. So anyone who's 33 is having what's known as a 10th house year by annual profection. Yes, I just wanted to double check that. And so the natal themes of the 10th house become important. Adele has in her whole sign chart the sign of Aries on the 10th, which means Mars is the ruler of her 10th house, whole sign house. And Mars then becomes what's known as the Time Lord for the year ahead. Now, that is all part of the annual profections technique, but there is a piece where we're looking at the condition and the impact of that annual perfected Time Lord, not just in the natal chart, but also in the solar return chart, to see how the year is going to unfold. Do we have a solar return version of the Time Lord planet that is better or more functional than the natal version of that Time Lord planet? Or do we have a solar return version of the Time Lord planet that is less functional or comes with more challenges than the natal version of that planet? Straight away at a very simple level, with natal Mars in Aquarius versus solar return Mars in Cancer, we could see that there might be a few hiccups, hurdles, or challenges to overcome this year, as Mars in Cancer is the fall placement for Mars, which would be considerably more challenging, less effective, or potentially more troublesome than Mars in Aquarius, which tends to have a little bit more of a neutral influence. Mars in Aquarius isn't in rulership or exaltation, and isn't in detriment or fall. So that's a very basic look at some of the things that I would be doing in the solar return chart. So that's how I'd work with it. I'd place the solar return around the natal chart. I would use the birth location, and I'm doing some very specific things where I'm drawing on the annual perfected Time Lord planet and assessing that in the natal chart versus the Time Lord chart, versus the solar return chart, I should say. So there's a few pieces of info and insight that will hopefully answer some of your questions too about solar returns. If this is a technique that you're still learning and exploring about, this might have created more questions or perhaps aroused your curiosity to learn more. And if that's the case, I would definitely encourage you to pop over and take my 2-part training, Profections and Solar Returns for Better Annual Forecasting, which is available via my website, kellysastrology.com. So you'll learn all about annual profections and you'll learn how to work with the solar return. It's about 3.5 hours of training that you'll get there that will give you some immediately applicable, very practical and very accessible forecasting tips and tools that you can use for yourself and others right away. If you have any more questions about solar returns or anything else to do with timing in astrology, let me know via the comments below and I'll do my best to cover them in a future video. Thanks so much for joining me today, everyone, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.